So when we start looking at absolute value equations, okay, one thing we need to know is kind of a little bit of what absolute value is, because that's going to help us out a bit. So absolute value is the distance a value is from 0. So one thing we always know about distance is always going to be positive. I mean, it's sort of like when you're going through and you're driving a car. When you drive a place and you drive back home, the odometer doesn't go backwards. So whatever comes out of those absolute values is positive. Now, it doesn't mean every answer that we get is going to be positive. It just means that sometimes when it's in here and it comes out, it'll end up being that way. So I wanted to start with an example that's a little bit simpler so we can kind of see why we do some of the things that we do, because it makes it make more sense. So for instance, if we get something like the absolute value of x equals 4, you're saying what number or numbers are 4 away from 0? Well, we always know what one of them is, 4, okay? And that makes sense. Right, nicely done. Because if I'm starting at 0, and I'm saying, okay, you're right, this one's 4. But like Colby said, he's right, negative 4 is also 4 away from 0. So I'm going to get two values, and it won't necessarily just be negative and positive, that number every time. But I'm always going to get two answers for these, because there's always two numbers coming from each direction that are going to work for these. So let's say, it becomes an equation. Okay, so x minus 6, the absolute value of x minus 6 equals 3. So we're going to do two equations, and then we're going to be done with this. So my first step is always keep the equation the same, just lose the bars. So I just wrote down x minus 6 equals 3. Okay. I got to solve the mini equation. So what's my one step to solve x minus 6 equals 3? Okay, we're going to plus the 6. And 3 plus 6 is 9. Okay, I got one of my answers. And again, when I'm doing it, and we'll talk about the checking in a minute, I can even check these to make sure I got the answer right. Now for my second equation, one thing's going to change. We're just going to change the answer. Notice I didn't change the x minus 6 at all. The only thing that's different is now that that's going to be minus 3. So my one step is still going to be the same. I'm still trying to get x by itself. So I'm still going to plus 6 to each side. But negative 3 plus 6, if I owe somebody $3 and then I find $6 in my pocket, means now I'm $3 ahead. And that's going to be my second answer. So to let us see why that is, if I was to look back at the original problem and literally plug in the value, you're like, okay, 9 minus 6 is 3. But we already said whatever comes out of the absolute value at the end is going to be positive. So 3 equals 3. That's true. Okay, so I know 9's a good answer. If I plug the 3 in, and this will let us see really the power of absolute value, 3 minus 6 is negative 3. You're like, aha. But remember, the absolute value bars are kind of magical. They make everything positive because it's a distance. So the absolute value of negative 3 is 3, and both my answers work. So again, you're always going to have two answers. And you can check them. You don't have to. I'm never going to tell you you have to. But it's just something for us to consider. Now, will some of these be nice and short and easy? Yep. Are some going to be a little longer? Absolutely, because not everything is simple with these. Like this first one. This is going to be about as easy as it gets. Okay, two equations. No, I don't even have anything to solve. It's just x equals and it's done already. I like this. And then remember, my second time, the only thing that changes is my answer becomes negative. Now if it's just x, I'm done. If it's just x, because and it'll show up a little bit better when we actually start doing them, when there's a little more to do. But remember, it's a two-step process. Every time with these, my first equation is just to copy what I see. I just lose the bars. Then the second time, again, copy what's in the bars. Don't change anything there. But I'm going to change my answer to negative. That's the only difference. So two equations every time. Keep the first one exactly the same. Just change my solution in the second one. And then just solve these. And that's going to get me my two answers. So what's my one step in each of these to get a by itself? Minus 2. I'll just do them both at once. So 1 minus 2 is negative 1. Ooh, negative. I owe somebody $1 and now I borrow 2 more. Now I owe him 3. So just keep reminding yourself of what the pattern is. The pattern is always keep the first equation the way it is, just lose the absolute value bars. My second equation is just change the answer to negative. And then again, my steps will be the same for both. It just means my answer will be a little different at the end. Because here, if I want to get b by itself, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. And I'm going to do that on both of these. So 3 plus 3, okay, so that one would be 6. And here, I owe somebody $3, and then I find $3. I'm good to go. So that's the split that I keep talking about on these. And it's going to be the same. I mean, some of you say things change around too much. Here's a way that things are going to basically stay the same. Now let me move down just a little bit, because I want to increase what we're doing here a little bit more. So let's go to 6. Again, first one, keep it exactly the same. We just lose the absolute value bars. Second one, keep it the same except my answer changes to the negative side so I can get both sides of the value. Now this time it's going to take a little bit longer. Because again, I want to get my t term by itself, but it's not just t this time. So I have to undo my plus 5. And again, if I want to use the calculator for this part, that's fine. No big deal. But this time I got one last step that I have to divide by 2. Whoops. There went my writing utensil. And then I'm just going to do the same thing with my other equation. And if I did the steps right on the first one, I actually got a guide for what to do on the second. It'll be the exact same 2 steps. And I get my other answer. And again, some of you may be looking and saying, well, wait a minute, I thought you said with absolute value everything comes out positive. I'm seeing negative numbers. I agree, but remember, these numbers, when I plug them in, when I simplify the answer at the end, it's that answer that comes out positive. Doesn't mean I can't get negative answers. But again, it's just that same process. So like if we're doing number 8 right below, I'm like, okay, first equation, just copy it. Second equation, copy it, but change the answer to negative. So once I do that, again, take my equation solving experts, And yes, you can get decimals or fractions. That's okay. Not every answer will always come out as a whole number for everything. And you can put the decimal. If I get a fraction, I'm just going to leave it as a fraction. But it just keeps going back again to the ability to solve an equation. And that's what the whole idea of algebra, for the most part, is anyway. Can I solve an equation and figure out what that final value is going to be? Now, is there a twist? There can be. Sometimes something may go on in your problem that's not in the bars, like here. And I put a little note here to try and help you out. I always have to have my absolute value alone first before I can split it up. I cannot split it up right now or my answer is not going to be right. So here, I want to get my absolute value alone first. Then once I do that, now I can split it. So that's really the only twist that we can run into on these. If there's anything that's not in the bars, that's got to go away before I can do my split, where I change the answer and then solve it. But again, notice I never change what's inside the bars when I'm making my equations. Because if I did, I'd change the value of the problem. And get my answers. So we got one more where we can deal with having to get it by itself here, and then I have the weird problem at the very end. But it's just on this one, because I had x minus 3 equals negative 3, and when I had to add 3 to both sides, negative 3 and positive 3 is where my 0 is coming from. And just like it is over on number 10, it's going to be the same idea as what we were doing in 9. I've got to get my bars alone first. Once I get them alone, now I can split it. And again, the only thing that changes from equation 1 to equation 2 is the answer. Now here's the only thing that's tricky on this one. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get m alone, but it's got that negative stuck to it. So right now I'm adding 1 to it. So my first thing's got to be I got to understand that I got to minus the 1. Then my other parts to remember, oh yeah, that m's not positive yet, so I actually got one more step that I got to do with this. And so I'm going to do that exact same thing on both of these. My positive one that I'm adding here, I'll just minus to both sides. And then I'll just divide by the negative 1 that I'm multiplying times my m. And you'll hope there's a lot of these. There's one special case in this unit. Because we always kept saying that whatever comes out of here is positive. Well, what if that equals negative 2? Can I just change the sign? No. Since what always comes out of here is 0 or positive, if the beginning of your problem has a negative number here when you get ready to split it, you just write no solution, and the problem's done. Okay? Only if when you get ready to split, you've got a negative on that side. Because I can't get a negative out of here. It's impossible. Okay. So if you see that, but that's really the only weird twist type problem in this whole unit that we're going to be looking at. So to try and help you get a jump start, because again, we're always good about this. It's just about the fact if you're going to use the time that I give you or not. What I want to do is take a moment to get you started here on the worksheet. Now, I'm going to work down the left side here on the front. So I'm going to work these first 4 problems along the left here with you, 1, 3, 5, and 7, just to make sure we've got good examples working. First thing's always first. My absolute value's got to be alone. If it's not, whatever I'm doing to it has to get taken care of first. Once my bars are on a side by themselves, once my absolute value is on a side by itself, now I'm ready to split it into my 2 equations. So just leave it alone the first time, and the second time is when I turn that answer into a negative. And now I just solve the 2 equations, and I'm done. So since I'm multiplying negative 2 times n, I don't see a plus or minus in here, so that's how I know it's not add 2 is my opposite. My opposites divide since I'm multiplying. And over here, it's the same thing. That's the nice thing. If you get the setup right on the first one, the second one's easy because you're doing the same idea. Negative divided by negative is positive. And I can get my value that way. So I'm like, okay, maybe. And now sometimes whatever's in the bars, because again, I see, now that 9's not in the bars. What's the opposite of dividing something by 9? Times. So we're going to times both sides by 9. Now here's the thing we got to watch out for. On the left, all that 9 does is cancel out that 9 that's in my fraction. Okay, I'm not going to distribute it here. So b minus 4 equals 45 because I multiplied the 5 by the 9. And now my bars are alone. I'm ready to split. And again, the only thing I do on the second one is change the answer to negative. So that's a pretty quick one-stepper. All I got to do to get my b alone is to add the 4 to that. And again, if you're not sure on one, let the calculator help you out. Because as long as you get your steps written down right, we're going to be in pretty good shape. So you're like, dang, you put a lot on here. We got to do a first step too, just to get us into a good habit. What's that?
Number 2.
We can go back up and do number 2. We absolutely can. Let's do 5 and 7. We'll go back up and do number 2. Again, whole key, bars alone. Once it's alone, again, split them into 2. Change my answer to negative in the second one. So now it looks like I'm dividing m by 7. So what would the opposite be? Times. So I do that to both sides on both of them. And all that's going to do is get rid of the 7 over here. I'm not going to have 7m. I get my 2 answers. And we finally finally, when we get to number 7, have one that I don't have to do something first because my bars are on a side by themselves. About time. So keep it the same on the first one. Change the sign on the second. And my one step, since I'm multiplying by 9, is to divide. And that's going to be the same for both. So the process, it doesn't change. You just kind of get on a roll and you go with it. Now, Colby'd asked about number 2, so we're going to take a look at that one. Because we've done one where we had to divide, we've done one where we had to subtract, we did one where we have to add. So this last one that we're going to take a look at together, number 2, let me move this down so we can get number 2 up, because that'll also end up helping you with number 4. Right now, if I want to get this by itself, I'm multiplying it by 9. How do I get it by itself? Divide. So again, when I divide, the 9 just takes care of the 9 on the left. It doesn't mess with my absolute value at all. 9 divided by 9 is 1. And now my bars are alone. So I'm ready to split this up. And again, the only thing that changes is my answer becomes negative in the second one. So I'm like, okay, so here I'm adding negative 10 to n. What's my opposite going to be? And then I'm going to be done. Okay, and so if you subtract a negative, what's that the same as? Let's see. Minusing a negative is the same as adding the 10, because negative and positive 10 would cancel. So there's my n by itself. That's good. 1 plus 10 is 11. Negative 1 plus 10 is 9. And I'm ready to roll to the next one. So your job is to maybe if it's even just finishing the last 3 on this side to kind of reinforce what you're doing. And then if you need to clean up some stuff with the homework check, that's okay, because you still got about 20 minutes to work with. And then we're actually going to stick with this a little bit tomorrow, and we'll go from there.